Yay! Well done. We both nailed it. And I like the little
clap, but I was like, it's right in front of my microphone.
That was a very gentle clap. Thank you for preserving the ears of our listeners and viewers. What is up, everyone? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 297. Tonight's going to be a fun show because last week we were joined by David Roach on the show to talk about the Olympic trial marathon that occurred this last weekend. If you did not watch it, you still can. Go back. There's probably plenty of videos out there where you can watch the whole marathon breakdown. But basically, we figured out who the American marathon team will be at the upcoming Summer Olympics, which is pretty damn exciting. It was an incredible showing. Kim and I didn't get to watch it live, but we did get to follow some quick updates. We were at a trail camp over this last weekend. All that being said, tonight's going to be really fun because last week we talked about our predictions, and tonight we're going to talk with a person who actually competed at the Olympic trial marathon. Ladia Albertson-Junkans is on the show once again to join us and talk to us all about her experience, what it was like to qualify for this experience, train for it, put all your heart and soul into it, and get out there and race some of the best in America. It was super cool to watch the clips, the highlight clips, and kind of see how it all unfolded. And our guest tonight is going to tell us all about what it was like being there. So that's going to be pretty cool perspective tonight. And she's one of the very few athletes that was there that is not only a fantastic road runner, incredibly fast, but also a trail runner, an ultra runner. So there were a few athletes there of notable names, including Ladia. And so we're very excited to talk to her on tonight's show. So welcome everyone to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 297. The show begins now.
Ginger Runner.
Yay! What is up, everybody? How are you?
Hi.
Hi.
Again, it was like really just bumping in my ear there.
That music
just
makes you want to bob your head.
Yeah.
And then it quickly fades away and gives you two of these beautiful faces. Welcome, everyone, to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 297.
We are up there, and we are almost at episode 300.
We are technically 3 episodes. I want to say 3, but I'm like, well, it's the 4th episode from now. 3 episodes. We hit 300, which is going to be exciting. We don't know what we're doing for it yet. If you have ideas, obviously drop them into the chat room. We'd love to know what you'd love to see us do for the 300th episode. We reached our 6-year milestone a couple of weeks ago, which is pretty cool. The fact that we've been doing this consistently every Monday, with the very few occasions of moving it to a Tuesday or a different time slot, but Mondays at 6 p.m. Every single week for 6 years is the longest I've ever done anything consistently like that. So it's a testament to you, our wonderful viewers, for watching the show week after week or listening to the podcast. We wouldn't be doing this if you weren't here being a part of it with us. So it's a lot of fun. We are at episode number 297, and we're very excited about tonight's episode because we get to be joined by an incredible athlete we've had on the show before, but under different circumstances, having just completed the Western States 100 when last we spoke on the show. But after this weekend, in case you didn't know, the Olympic Trials Marathon, which is where America chose their marathon team for the Olympics, the upcoming Olympics, our guest traveled there, competed in the event, did incredibly well, and I'm sure has some stories to share with us in what it took to qualify, to train. You kind of, all athletes dream of being able to participate in the Olympics. It's every athlete's dream, even me, who has no chance whatsoever in getting into the Olympics. So what is it like to be so close and like to be able to compete with the best?
Stand on that start line with those people on that day.
Yeah. So we're going to talk to our guest tonight, Ladia Albertson-Junkans, and we're going to talk to her all about that experience. We can't wait. The last 2 weeks have just been so good for running. And the women's field this year there was just bonkers. It was so deep, over 400. And I believe it's 460 plus female competitors all made the qualifying time, showed up at that start line and competed. And it was just a really cool thing to witness. Kim and I are fresh off of a trail camp weekend. We got to participate in the Fleet Feet Hillbillies Trail Camp over on Orcas Island. It's our favorite annual tradition that we do now every year. We go out there with Brian Morrison and his wife Andrea Morrison and the whole Fleet Feet team, the volunteers and stuff, and we get to meet and hang out with wonderful humans, trail running, eating delicious food, drinking canned wine. It was just a pleasure. So we didn't get to watch a lot of the live Olympics
we were
trail
without
stuff, but
cell phone service, but Caroline, who is usually a camp counselor at the Hillbillies Trail Camp, was there running the trials also.
Yeah, so shout out to Caroline because she also did fantastic, and she's just an absolute beast of a runner. But before we even get into our guest and introduce everyone, I am Ethan, your host, but then also this lovely lady next to me is
Kim.
That intro
We're
was
just gonna
so perfect.
nail these intros.
Nailing it.
Like every week, it just gets better and better and more professional. So what is up, you guys? If you are new to our wonderful show, we are in fact live. We do have Ladia here with us. So if you have questions for her, please pop them into the chat room. We'll be pulling them throughout the hour. There's a lot of chit chat going on. We have Chrissy Mail in the chat room, who also joined us at Trail Camp this year. It was a real treat to share a speaking panel with Chrissy and to get to hang out with her and Petey this year.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
So if you are watching this live, jump into the live chat room. We obviously have a great crowd every single week, but if you have questions for our guest tonight, Ladia, jump in there and let us know, because Kim will be able to field those questions directly to Ladia, and it's going to be a great interaction tonight. Before we introduce our guests, of course, we also like to thank our wonderful Patreon supporters. Patreon.com/thegingernunner is where you can join the GR crew, as we call it. All different levels from $1 on up, and that participation helps support everything we do here. So this live show wouldn't happen week after week if it wasn't for that. We do this full time. We do reviews, films, we travel. All of that stuff is because of our Patreon crew. So we appreciate all of them. 2 individuals in particular at that top tier just go above and beyond, and they've just been incredible members of this community. Chris Lee out of Hong Kong has an organization called Trailblazer. If you find yourself in that region, if you want to find good trails to run near the Hong Kong area, visit Trailblazer. They have a brick and mortar shop. They also have a website. They have gear, all sorts of good stuff. So shout out to Chris and his team there. Brian Sands has been a longtime supporter and viewer of the show, lost over 100 pounds in his fitness journey, ran his first marathon, his first 50K over the age of 50, just absolutely crushing it, inspiring countless people in the process. And we like to shout him out at the beginning of every episode as well, because he just does so much for the community and is such a wonderful human. So thank you to those 2 individuals. Now, without further ado, I think it's about time. Let's bring on our incredible guest, Ladia Albertson-Junkans, fresh off of the Olympic trials weekend. Yay! Hello.
Hi. Hello. How are you?
We're good. How are you?
I'm great.
I think I already asked you this pre-show, but my first question is, how's the body feeling? Because this is one of the most competitive marathons out there right now. I can't imagine how much it cost your body. How are you feeling?
My legs actually feel pretty good. I'm not too sore, other than in my abdomen and diaphragm, which I think is because I had some dry heaving and then ultimately some projectile vomiting around mile 18. So really used those abs, and probably the high winds also. I was kind of getting jostled around at times, so putting those core muscles to good work.
It's a good experience when you talk to the athlete and you're like, how's the body feeling? You're like, body feels great, except for the abdominal muscles. Abdominal.
You got this.
Except for the abdomen, because I was projectile vomiting. That's a good race.
Always a good sign, yes.
Well, first, I want to kind of backtrack, because your journey to the Olympic Trials Marathon, it wasn't overnight. It was obviously, you have to qualify. You have to do all these different things. Is this been a dream of yours for a long time? Have you always wanted to try to qualify for the Olympics? Where does that start for you? Where does that journey begin?
Yeah, I first learned about the Olympic trials when I was in college. And it's kind of funny that it wasn't until college that I learned about the Olympic trials, because I always followed the Summer Olympics as a kid, but I guess it just never occurred to me how an athlete actually gets there. So it wasn't until college that I learned about the fact that you have to qualify for a trials, and then in the trials is how you then make the team for the Olympics. And it was kind of, as soon as I learned about the trials, I thought that would be a cool goal for after college.
Right.
I wasn't really sure what form running would take in my life after college, but maybe that could be a goal I would pursue. And it sort of fell off my radar after college because I was just kind of burnt out from the competitive racing and needed a break from just intense training. So I took a little bit of a break, and then I got back into running and slowly kind of started getting a little bit more consistent with my training and doing some races and putting down some decent times. And that's when it kind of got back on my radar of qualifying for the trials. But I actually ended up running a really good half marathon. I ran like a 1:13 half marathon a month before the Olympic trials window opened. So you have to get the qualifying time within the window.
Right.
And I ended up getting injured after that half marathon, and then also being very burnt out. And so that was actually when I sort of decided I was going to take a break from the roads and do some stuff on the trails instead. So I didn't. Well, I actually took one very last minute shot at trying to qualify for the 2016 trials at CIM in 2015, which was the second to last chance to make it to the 2016 trials. But I had been injured that whole summer and had just started running again and really hadn't trained properly for a marathon and had no idea what I was doing. So I sort of jumped into CIM, didn't eat a single thing during the race, which is also a big no-no, obviously, but I really did not know what I was doing. Bonked super hard and basically like jogged it in and did not qualify for 2016 Olympic trials. So, but I was really, once 2016 came around, I was really bummed that I wasn't there. And that's when I knew that this was really a goal that was important to me and that I really wanted to try to make happen for 2020.
We talked to Coach David Rich last week just kind of about what it takes to get not just the body there, but the mind there, because you're towing the line amongst competitors who you've probably watched on TV race and win marathons before, you grew up following and have been inspired by. And what's that like for you? So getting that qualifier, or at least knowing that you're going to be able to toe the line at the Olympic Trials Marathon, how do you get the mind ready? And is it as competitive? Like, do you know that you're going to be competing for a spot, or how does that kind of play out in your mind?
That's a really good question. You know, for me, this was so much about just being there and experiencing what it's like to be at the Olympic trials with 500 plus women who have run under 2:45 for a marathon, which is just the fact that it was 512 women who met that qualifying standard, ran faster than a 2:45 marathon. That's twice as many as have ever qualified ever since in the history of the trials. Wow. So that in itself is just an incredible achievement for women's running and really speaks to the momentum that has been building over the last several years. So for me, it was just a complete honor to even be going to a race where all of these other women were also going to be. And I really wasn't in any sort of mindset of trying to make a team. That's not really a realistic goal for me. Which is totally cool because I'm happy to be there as somebody who's helping push along the people in front of me.
It's interesting because I know that if I were to ever get an Olympic qualifying time, and you smile and laugh at me thinking I can't.
That's not true.
There will be a day that I do it. I'll be 85 and I'll be first at 85 years old. But I know that if I were to ever, my mind would be like, wow, I got the qualifying time. I'm just going to go and I'm going to have fun, and I'm not going to, knowing that it takes such a high level and perfection to get onto that team. Did you go into it with that same sort of mindset of like, I'm just going to have fun, kind of like what you just said? Or was there that bit of hope? Because coming from the ultra world, the mental game can be a huge component in success. Having run Western States 100, you know this, having paced it and seen it firsthand, where you can be having a mediocre day compared to what your training has you at, but the mind can actually help you and put you in a place much higher up in the standings than you can imagine. So did that sort of mindset come into play at all? Like, was there that hope that maybe Ladia could go to the Olympics?
There was a hope that Ladia could have her best day in a marathon on that day. So yes, and I like that you brought up perfection, because this is actually something that I struggled with for quite a while in my own running in high school and then throughout college, and was actually a big reason that I started gravitating more and more to the trails, because in high school and college, I really felt like I had to be perfect in order to be a good runner. And I didn't give myself enough grace, and I didn't allow for enough flexibility in kind of my approach. And it, really burnt me out emotionally. And I think, too, it actually probably held me back from achieving my potential, because I was so afraid to fail, because perfection was the goal. And really, I mean, that's an intimidating goal to begin with, but I also don't think it's the best goal. And I think I've talked about this before, but it was really Gabe Grunwald, my friend, who I went on to the University of Minnesota team with at the same time. We were both freshmen, and became friends really early on in college. She was the one who really showed me that trying your best is way better than striving for perfection. And also, trying your best gives you the room to really explore your potential, rather than fixating so much on this idea of perfection that's not realistic, but also just isn't true to who you are, right? As opposed to kind of like letting your potential organically take shape through trying your best. So this time around, I do feel like running on the trails, being in the trail community, doing these ultra distances has really helped me let go of what I used to really grab onto in terms of perfection. And you have to have a more flexible approach when it comes to trail racing. It's all about adapting. It's all about problem solving. And that has really helped me let go of, I think, the perfection that used to really hold me back. And so going into this marathon, I tried to really carry forward what I had learned from the trails in terms of keeping that flexible approach, being really adaptable, not sweating the small things. And sometimes I might take that too far. For example, my husband likes to give me a hard time because I don't really think much about nutrition and fueling on the run, and I didn't do a good job practicing ahead of time, and that is part of why I ended up having stomach issues in the marathon, which is no surprise. But I also think it has enabled me to enjoy the experience so much more when I'm not so fixated on perfection.
It's been interesting, and I'm sure you can attest to this, as you just mentioned, having that balanced sort of skill set of being a trail runner, an ultra trail runner, as well as a marathoner, and having a collegiate background in road racing and faster, shorter distance racing. Being able to dive into the deep end of ultras, even at 100-mile distance, you are like, it basically will break everyone down at some point. There will be problems that need solving at some point. And it's interesting to kind of hear you talk about that, because I'm like, yeah, in ultras, you get those problems, but you have time. You have time to solve them, right that ship, celebrate, and like excel as a result of solving the problem. Right? As I bet in a marathon, especially something like this, you might run into problems, but you have a finite amount of time to solve it and try to continue moving forward. I bet did you feel that at all? Like when you started dry heaving and projectile vomiting, was that like fuck, the whole day's gone? Or is it like, I could still get this?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And I love that you bring that up, because yes and no. So yes, you do have less time to problem solve, but I think a big lesson that I've learned in ultra running is that everything is going to change in one direction or another, for the better or for the worse. And the best thing you can do is keep showing up and keep putting one foot in front of the other. And so for me, when I started dry heaving, I did start thinking, oh no, I might have like a vomiting episode. And in my trail races, those vomiting episodes have sometimes lasted. I mean, at Western States, it lasted over 10 hours. Thankfully, a marathon hopefully doesn't take that long. So
Right.
it wasn't going to last that long. But it did kind of cross my mind. This might be a recurring issue for the rest of the race. I still have 8 miles to go. I started throwing up, and it was just like, as soon as I could tell it wasn't going to come up again, I just took off. And, it didn't even cross my mind to give up in that moment, because I've learned through trail running that everyone else is struggling just as much as you're struggling. And everyone else is going to have some low moments still in these last 8 miles. And I might, catch another wind and feel good for a couple minutes here or there. And you just don't want to count yourself out at any point. And I actually did kind of catch back up. I didn't quite catch the group that I had been with, but I was able to still catch quite a few women after pulling over the side and doing my thing. So
that's got to be kind of a really cool motivating factor is, okay, I have to step off. I have to take care of what's happening here, throw up, puke, do what you need to do. But being able to catch back up to the women that you're competing with is also that's got to be motivating. I bet if there was 75 more miles in the race, you would have been.
Oh, I don't know. I think the best part, though, was, I didn't even have to step off. I couldn't step off the course, for one thing, because it was lined with people, which was really awesome. And we'll get to that. But so I'm just projectile vomiting, and the crowd is gasping, and some lady's like, "Oh my goodness, do you need water? Are you okay?" And I just sort of wiped my mouth, and then I just took off, and the whole crowd just erupted, and they were like, "Yeah!"
That's so rad. That is such a badass moment too. I can picture you doing that and just yeah, Ladia, that's so rad. I wish the camera was on you at that time. I know that I want to dive into the weekend and what it was like being in Atlanta, and just the feeling the city had, and sort of that warmth. Before we get to that, of course, we have live questions. Kim, take it away.
Yeah, a question from Randy in the chat room. Randy says, Ladia, did your training plan for the race change very much with the expectation of wind? I'm sure you trained for the rolling course, but what about the wind?
Really good question, Randy. Well, I didn't even know it was going to be windy until a couple days before. But thankfully, here in Washington, we get all sorts of weather, especially this time of year. And I live in the Snoqualmie Valley, where we get a lot of gap winds. So unintentionally, I think I did get actually some good wind training, and certainly plenty of hill training.
I'll let you keep going.
Yeah. Question from Vivian in the chat room. Vivian says, with what feels like the whole country watching, what did you do to help calm your nerves and stay focused on race day? And just kind of a dovetailing question to that from Joey. Joey says, how much higher was your heart rate at the start of this race compared to other races you've run?
Very good questions. And I have to say, I haven't felt that nervous for a race in a very long time. And it kind of surprised me, actually, in part probably because I just haven't felt that nervous in quite a few years for a race. But sort of backing up a bit, I got to Atlanta late Thursday afternoon. And as soon as I touched the ground, basically, it was one thing after another. There were all of these logistics that you have to take care of. All of it was organized seamlessly by the Atlanta Track Club, and they did a phenomenal job putting on this massive event. It was incredible. But it really was you have to check in your uniform. You have to get your shoes checked. You have to prepare your bottles. You have to drop them off at a certain time. I was doing a live event with Allie on the Run, and trying to meet up with certain people. And so it really was one thing after another, basically from the moment I got there until Saturday morning. So the morning of the race. And I think just all the emotion from that intensity of one thing after another, the reality of being at the Olympic trials setting in, the reality that a big reason I was there in the first place was because of Gabe, and, the reality that she's gone, and it just all hit me that morning of the race. And I probably cried for like a straight hour. And Adam walked into the hotel room at some point, and I was just sitting on the bed with like a pile of Kleenex next to me, just bawling.
Mm.
And I needed to get it all out, right? It was like all of these emotions, and I was overwhelmed by the whole experience in a good way, and also sad, and just, it was like so many things happening all at once. And these nerves that like I hadn't experienced really probably since college or shortly after. So who knows if that's, the right way to deal with all of those emotions. But I think for me, I just needed to let them run their course. And then actually once I got to where we were allowed to kind of warm up, they had a tent area for us before the race. So I showed up, about an hour before the race. As soon as I was there, I felt totally at ease, totally like settled and excited, and nothing but positive emotion. I really wasn't even that nervous standing on the start line. So a lot of that emotion really came out in those morning hours before the race.
I've been just really excited to kind of hear more about the weekend, and you talked a little bit of it there, just kind of the logistics and the step by step is what happens when you get off the plane. I know the Atlanta Track Club took care of all of the athletes, really.
Yes.
They just kind of took care of and brought to the various locations and all that sort of thing. Can you kind of walk us through that process and what it was like over the course of the weekend to be a part of something of this scale? Because you have had experience at like places like Western States and other big races that have that spectacle, but this had to have been a new level of it. So I'm curious, like, what were the cool things that happened? What were the exciting things that happened? I'd love to know just sort of the details of the weekend before the race.
It was definitely unlike anything I've ever experienced. It was so amazing. And it really started pretty much back in August when we started getting emails from Atlanta Track Club, really like giving us information and getting that whole process started. Because this is something that they've been working on for the past year and a half straight. And their communications have just been so detailed, so thorough, so timely, with reminders and everything just so seamless for the athletes. I can't praise them enough. The Atlanta Track Club, they just did a phenomenal job. And that, really just translated beautifully into the actual weekend itself. So as soon as you got there, there was never any question of what you needed to do or where you needed to be. There were hundreds of volunteers all around the area where the race was taking place, plus inside the hotel. And Atlanta Track Club provided travel and lodging support for all athletes, which
That's
is
cool.
The first time ever. Usually only athletes who have gotten an A standard are given some sort of support like that.
Right.
So, they just wanted to make it a world-class experience for everybody. And that includes the spectators too, who I think just had a phenomenal experience. And there was no shortage of resources and information to figure out like how you could spectate and where you needed to go and what zones were permissible and whatnot. So yeah, it made it so easy for us athletes because we just really had to, just kind of follow along and didn't have to worry about any of those details.
I know a lot was learned from the 2016 OTM. We got to spectate the LA OTM back in 2016. I'm working on my sentences, and having witnessed that, I can vouch for that one being terrible. The heat, the course, how they handled athletes and provided
some lack of supplies.
Those who helped out, listen, we thank you for that experience because I know there were a lot of volunteers that were out there in the heat and helping the athletes the best they could. There's a lot of stuff on the back end, I'm sure, that went into putting that on, but there were so many failures for athletes. So it looks and sounds like the Atlanta Track Club learned from their experience in 2016 and made it a really fantastic experience for all athletes. Is that kind of what you experienced?
For sure. Not having been at the 2016 LA Olympic trials, but having heard about it, I think it couldn't have been farther from, opposite experience for the athletes. But Atlanta Track Club does have many years of experience putting on big events like this. They do the Peachtree every July, which I think brings out like 65,000 people. So they're just very, very good at what they do, and they take a lot of pride in it, and you can see that, and it's really cool. And it's also really cool how much pride the city seems to take in the event. Like one of the big skyscrapers had good luck runners across the top of it, and just like the city itself seemed really excited to be hosting such an important part of the running community.
Before we get into like specific race stuff, I'm curious about some of the logistics beforehand with bottles. Like I know bottles was a huge conversation.
By the bottles.
Me too. So there's articles that have tried to break it down. I don't think do a good job. So as an athlete, what are you told? What happens? How does it work? Is there really a 5-block long section with tables and you have to find, like, how does it work?
Yes. It was a work of art, and it was flawless, and it was incredible. So like I said, we had to check in our bottles in advance, and they also had a table set up as an example of what it was going to look like for the athletes when you're out actually running. And yes, it was 5 blocks worth of tables, starting with the men's set and then the women's. Each table was numbered, and each athlete knew their table number and the position on the table for their bottles. Some tables had 6 bottles, some had 12. I knew I was table 26, position 3. Every time you come around, so there were 6 personal fluid stations plus 6 general fluid stations. So every 2 miles, you have water, Powerade, gel, and then every 4 miles, you had your own personal fluid, whatever that might be. And I mean, I've never done a marathon where I've had personal fluid, so I guess I have nothing to compare it to, but I was really nervous about it and just pretty much assumed I wasn't going to get my bottle half the time, but I got my bottle every time completely easily. It was so seamless. It really was a work of art, and I know that they spent months figuring it out and testing it. And I guess they were like out there on the streets, like trying to go through every possible scenario of high wind, and then we're going to tape it. And if it's torrential downpour, what are we going to do? So, I mean, they just thought of everything and wanted to make it such a great experience for everyone. And it really was.
I would be high stress with that.
Yeah.
Because how long between you released the bottles to them, like basically when did you have to turn the bottles in? Was it before the race? Was it a day before?
Yeah, it was. So on Friday we had time slots that we were assigned to drop off our bottles, but I mean, it was 24 hours to less than 24 hours beforehand, and then they kept our bottles cold up until the time of the race.
Wow.
For everyone. So like in LA, I heard that, the Powerade or the water was really, really hot, and like they went above and beyond and wanted everyone's bottles to be refrigerated.
That's amazing.
And they kept track of like if you had attached a gel to your bottle, what gel it was in case it fell off, so they could put it back on. It was incredible.
I mean, that's a logistic that I'm very detail oriented, like especially with Tiger Claw, we try to think of all the little details. Whoever was in charge of that detail at Atlanta Track Club, the hat comes off to you, my friend, because I can only imagine the levels of nuance to that. The fact that they were out there testing tables and winds and like how to set, that's brilliance.
It'd be like a high stress job.
High stress job, but this is the moment like we're hearing about it for the first time of like how it actually works, and we're celebrating it. And I hope that person at some point gets sent this podcast so people who weren't there can like recognize that person or that team. Gear and shoes and stuff like that. I'm also curious about that. Did they have to check all your things beforehand to confirm it's all up to specifications? I know you had Brave Like Gabe singlet. I know you also run it in Brooks shoes. So did you have to like turn your stuff in and have it looked at, or how did that work?
Yes, everything had to be turned in, including what you warm up in. And actually, I was not able to wear anything Brave Like Gabe because the USATF is very strict about how large your logo can be. So they were measuring everybody's logos on every item of clothing. And if it was too large, then they put tape over it. And so the Brave Like Gabe stuff isn't up to spec.
I thought there was a small one. Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, and it's okay because Brooks has really supported me in my trail racing, but also on this journey. And so I was happy to wear their kit too. Yeah.
And did you wear the Hyperion Tempo or the Elite?
The Elite.
How did those feel? How did those work?
I love them. Yeah, they're really great.
Chance you got to race in them?
It was the first time I raced in them, but I have been training in them, doing like workouts in them. Mm-hmm.
Was there lots of talk amongst the athletes about whether or not the Alpha Flies were going to be what people ran in? That was a whole conversation that happened the day before the race of like, everyone got a pair. And it's like, who would race in those for the first time on race day? Like, who would do that? Plus sponsors and all that kind of thing.
Right. You know, I myself wasn't engaged in any conversations around that because I didn't even bother getting a pair and have no interest in having a pair. Mm-hmm. But I did see a lot of people wearing them in the race. So I think a lot of people did decide to wear them for the first time on race day. And I think it seemed like from what I heard, most people had a positive experience or at least a neutral experience. I do remember at one point hearing behind me this constant squeak every time someone was stepping down. And I think it's because the air bubble popped in the person's shoe because there's little air pockets.
Yeah.
And then I also heard a story about someone else whose air pocket popped in the middle of the race and her whole foot was like all bruised up and not good. So clearly there's some
would drive me crazy.
Potential disadvantages to a shoe like that kind of has a different structure to it.
Yeah, no doubt. And that was kind of the thing that Kim and I were talking about too, is like, wow, okay, so every athlete has the opportunity to race in these shoes. I don't even want to put my toes into the water of talking about the shoes. But I was like, who would race in something new on race day, especially at such a high stakes event? It's kind of one of those, trust what you've been training in and trust what you work with, because that's what you know. Last thing you want is a air pocket puncturing or your foot getting bruised up. We have tons of live questions. Kim, take it away.
First is a comment. Brett in the chat room says second place male finisher wore them for the first time on Saturday.
Yeah, I do know that. So it works for some people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Stefan in the chat room asked, what was your opinion on having this course be a hillier course layout versus what the actual Tokyo course will be?
I personally loved it as a trail runner and as someone who likes running hills. That's the kind of course I want to run. And I think it made it a really exciting race, and it made it much more of a race in terms of competing against each other rather than a time trial. And I think that makes for a much more exciting Olympic trials personally.
The LA course in 2016 had a lot of 180-degree turns. I know that this course had one or two as well. Did you have to practice doing that? Did you have any preparation for that? Was that an issue?
I didn't practice for it, but actually they didn't feel that sharp because the roads were really wide and we were basically going, from one side of the road around almost a median to the other side.
So it's wider than like a cone in the middle.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, you still did slow down, but it was half a second of doing that. So it wasn't a big deal.
We talked about this on last week's show too, how the hilly course could benefit trail runners, ultra runners, people who train in those types of conditions. Did you change any workouts or change any of your training to accommodate the course, or was it business as usual?
I did try to do a few hillier road runs than maybe I otherwise would have. But I'm pretty whimsical with my training, so I can't say that anything's super thought out much in advance. But knowing that it was a hilly course, I did intentionally kind of seek out some hillier routes.
I did a hill repeat workout a couple of weeks before the OTM on a hill. I think you regularly do hill workouts out in Snoqualmie. And I remember just going like, what the fuck is with this road? This sucks. It destroyed my soul. And it sounds awesome. Like you've done repeats on it many times and it's like one of your favorite places to run. And I'm like, I don't know how Ladia does it. I don't know how she does it. So I bet that made you super strong on Saturday, that hill.
I hope so. Were you running up the Snoqualmie Parkway?
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah,
I'm like
that's
looking at my
fun
watch
hill.
going, oh, I'm going to try to do repeats up this. And you realize that your fast pace is the same as walking. So
Yeah.
I was like,
And it just keeps going.
It just keeps going. I was like, is that the end? No, nope, that's not the end.
Nope.
Let's get to a question and then we'll get to sort of what happened at mile 18.
Yeah, interesting question from Randy. Randy is asking, wondering if you get starstruck. Are any runners there? Any running heroes that you got to meet there?
I really didn't. Part of it is just I try to be really respectful of other people, especially in that environment. I mean, the people that I look up to are the ones who are really, it's not all people that I look up to are only those people, but the people that I'm starstruck by are the ones who are trying to make an Olympic team. And this is like, they've poured everything into these moments. And so I think just like really respecting that and letting them do their thing. So no, I didn't. I got to talk to a lot of super wonderful women and meet a lot of new friends. But I can't say that I necessarily talked to a runner that I've maybe looked up to for many, many years. Someone like Des or Molly Huddle yeah.
A reverse of that question, did anyone come up to you who maybe has been a fan of yours and talk to you at all?
Not really necessarily a fan of mine, but it was really cool to meet people who have been touched by Gabe and who were there representing Brave Like Gabe and wearing their Running on Hope gear. That was so special and meaningful for me. So I had several people come up to me and just tell me how much Gabe has meant to them. And, or even I saw a couple people on the street with gear. And so I sort of ran them down, and yeah, that was really awesome.
I am super curious about this race and how it played out, how it met expectations, how it was harder, or just basically how you felt. So from the gun, what's sort of going through your mind? How are those first early miles going? And do you get caught up in the excitement, in the pace, which is obviously probably through the roof early on in a race like this? How did that all go down?
Yeah, well, so over 460 women started the race. And pretty early on in the course, there was actually kind of a sharp turn that inevitably turned into a bottleneck. And I started in the back half of that 460 plus group of women. So when we hit that bottleneck, actually, everybody just stopped running, and we were just standing there for a hot second and walking for a little bit, and then
really
get around the corner and everybody takes off again. And so it was kind of just comical, and you just have to roll with it, right? But within that first mile, I remember seeing Devon's blonde ponytail up ahead. And so I just sort of set my eyes on that. And I said to myself, Devon is so experienced. She knows what she's doing. Like, she's going to run a super smart race. Just keep her in your sights and try to do what she does, and you're probably going to have a great day. And that's essentially what I did for the first, I think, like 5 or 6 miles. I was just kind of like 100 or 200 meters behind her. And as I would bring more friends around me, and I would tell them, I'd be like, keep that blonde ponytail with the purple headband in your sights, because she's going to be smart about this. And, she knows how to run hills and whatnot. And so we kind of gauged off her, which was fun. And then it was just sort of like finding groups to run with. And like, if you're lucky, you might even know one of the women there. And it's always comforting to feel like someone out there and can kind of settle into someone you're familiar with. Mm-hmm. And that's really how the first, I would say, like 15 miles progressed. I was with my friend Katie, and then we caught Cam. And so we were running with Cam Mayfield for a while. And yeah, it was like long run with your friends out there.
When did things start to go off the rails?
Well, my legs felt really good. So
And I mean purely like stomach based, because I know I don't want to say off the rails, because obviously you had a great race, but there was a moment where things started to shift, I guess.
Yeah, well, my legs felt really good the whole time, essentially, until, the last couple of miles. But my stomach sort of started bothering me early on, and I was worried about it even in the morning because it was a 12:20 p.m. start, which is pretty late, obviously. And I again hadn't really practiced my pre-race fueling, and I was super nervous, so I was kind of forcing food down, but I was worried I wasn't going to eat enough, and then I was going to bonk. So I think I just kind of ate too much in the morning because my stomach was not having it pretty early into the race. So then by about 14, 15 miles, it was really upset. And I was just like, okay, just keep your cool. It's going to be fine. Just problem solve, whatever. Then I started dry heating. And then by 18, it all came up. But I felt better after puking.
It sounded like a full ultra puke and rally sort of moment.
Hit the reset button.
Reset button completely.
It really was. Yeah.
And I want to kind of relive that moment. So having experienced full bonks and races before, specifically marathons, like road marathons, when you get to that point where you're like, I'm going to throw up, or this is not going well. And the spectators, and like you're talking about, the course is just lined with people. My brain goes to, I'm trapped. I have nowhere to go. I either go on the shoes of the spectators or like I just do it in the middle. Were you trying to find a way out? Like when you're dry heaving and you know that it's going to be not that anymore, what's sort of the brain? What did you end up doing?
Yeah, well, maybe because I have experience now with this, it was almost automatic. Like my body just knew what to do. So I found myself like I sort of pulled off to the side. Most people were running kind of in the middle of the street. And I mean, so I can't underscore this enough. The spectators were off the charts, through the roof, all the superlatives. It was insane, like lining the course for probably all but maybe 4 of the last 5 miles and just screaming. Like there were moments where it was deafening. It was so cool. And so I just kind of pulled over, and there was still space between me and the spectators because they were sort of roped off. But that's where I just let it all fly, and it was kind of splashing all over. I think people were probably recoiling a bit. And then, yeah. But the runners were like far enough to the other side of me. So, yeah.
I just love it because I know as an ultra runner, you're probably like, this is totally normal. Let's just reset. Let's move on. But for the spectators, they're probably just like, what just happened?
And then you do like the mouth wipe.
The mouth wipe and then the booking away is like, that's so rad. So then things obviously started to turn around and you start catching back up. And what does it feel like to run those last 6 miles, the last 10K of the OTM?
Yeah, it was really special. That was really where it was just like me and Gabe out there kind of having our moment. And the last 5 miles were pretty sparse with spectators because it was this offshoot off the kind of 3-loop cycle we had been on. And I think a lot of people also were like running to the finish line, understandably. So it was almost the only time in the race where there was like some calm and just peace and quiet. And also when you're really starting to hurt too and your legs are getting heavy. But yeah, I just thought a lot about Gabe and wanted to do my best for her. And yeah, it was nice. It was also really hard because those last 4 miles had some pretty punchy climbs and a lot of wind. There was some pretty strong headwinds.
Was it all that you had hoped for and expected? Is it something that you would like to try for again? Was the experience something that you will cherish forever?
Definitely something I'll cherish forever. And I definitely want to do it again in 2024. And I want to bring more people with me, especially from out here on the east side or in Seattle. And I also want to bring some more trail runners with me next time. I've kind of been harping on some of my trail running friends to go for it in 2024. But yeah, there's nothing like it, and it's such an honor to be there. And so if I have another chance to be there, I will definitely do that.
Did you get any mementos? Because I know they didn't do medals, but they did do some various things for you to hold on to. Was there anything that you're like, I'm never going to get rid of this. This is what I'm going to hold on to as the memory?
Yeah, they gave us this really cool poster that was designed by a local artist that I think is beautiful. And so I'm going to frame that and put it on the wall. And I would honestly, I like that better than a medal, like the tiger claw wood pieces that you guys gave us last year. Like I have that on the wall. I'm looking at it right now, actually. So yeah.
It's such a privilege to be able to talk to you about this sort of thing, and we really appreciate you being so open and discussing what went down this last weekend. It was as much as little signal as we had. It was so cool to be able to see just the highlights, one of which we were like needed to know what Laddie was up to. And it was just so cool to follow along as someone who's never gotten to experience what it's like behind the scenes. We appreciate some of the insight because it really is neat for the rest of us runners to sort of see and kind of live vicariously through you. Can you share just where people can find you on social media and stuff like that? Because I know there's going to be residual questions. We have a bunch of questions still to ask in our after show with Ladia, but where can they find you, Ladia? Where can they follow you on social media and stuff?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram as Ladia Hallie. And I do want to give a shout out to, because I counted, there were 15 trail runners in the race, at least 15 that I'm aware of. And I thought that was super cool. And Rachel Drake had an amazing run out there. So people need to kind of follow up with her about what her experience is like, because I know she also had a really awesome core group of women she was training with down in Portland, and it was really fun for me to watch their training from afar and see them come together, and then they all like had really great races there. So really just kind of showing that power of working together and bringing women along with you.
Go ahead.
Oh, and I will say, I believe Rachel Drake will be racing Tiger Claw this year.
She
also.
will. And
go ahead.
She's bringing one of her road friends too. So, we're bringing some of them over to our side. They're bringing us over to their side. It's great.
Like, that's what I thought was really cool about the trials, that we do know a lot of people that are running in the trials this last weekend. Ladia, one of them. Rachel Drake is one of them because she's going to be running at Tiger Claw. You will be returning to Tiger Claw. It is just so cool to know you, but it's also cool to watch you run. And I can't wait to share everyone that's going to be at Tiger Claw this year, whether spectator, volunteer, or runner. You're going to get to share some trails with Ladia, and it's pretty damn cool to watch her run, because she runs so fast, so fast up the Snoqualmie Parkway that I don't know how she does it. Let's see, what was oh, there it is. 141st place out of 390 women, 2 hours, 46 minutes, 8 seconds. Ladia Albertson-Junkans just crushed it out there. It seemed like what was really cool was that a lot of the finishers, they would say, oh, I finished 146th, and someone maybe 3 seconds ahead of them finished like 130th or something. It seems like it was such a tight pack of elites. It just felt like it was so close. Like everyone was just racing so close. Did it feel like that? Did it feel just like a massive group of fast people?
Definitely. I mean, there was always someone to run with, which is one of the coolest parts about being in a race like that. Very rarely do you get to have even 3 or 4 women to run with, let alone 400 plus, and just lining the street the whole way. Like whenever there was a long downhill and you could look ahead and it was just this sea of women in front of you, it was so cool.
And just to know that like first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth places are all separated by seconds. It's just, it's such a wild thing to see. Ladia, we can't thank you enough for your time tonight. We are going to move into our after show with Ladia. She's going to stick around. So if you would like to join us in the after show, it's very easy to do. All you got to do is go to patreon.com/thegingerrunner. For as little as $1 a month, you get access to our after shows, both live and archived. So that's a lot of fun, and we encourage you to go check that out if you have not joined the crew already. There's cool perks on the back end and stuff like that. But before we get to the after show, at the end of all of our live streams, we like to recognize members of the community who are out there doing awesome things, crushing goals, much like Ladia. So we call it our GR Crew Member of the Week. Kim has pulled aside our Crew Member of the Week. Who would that be this week, Kim?
This week's GR Crew Member of the Week are a bunch of people. We mentioned earlier in the show that we did have the privilege of going to Brian and Andrea's Hillbillies Trail Camp this weekend. They've invited us back. This is my 3rd year, Ethan's 4th year, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Brian and Andrea are part of our Patreon crew. So I want to give a shout out to those two specifically, but also to all of the rest of the GR crew that were at trail camp this weekend.
Absolutely.
You guys are all incredibly kind. You're incredibly supportive. We enjoyed spending time with you all. So that is my GR crew shout out for this week.
It's a good shout out.
Everyone that was at Orcas this weekend.
It was a good contingent. We got some good photos and stuff. We'll be posting those in the GR Crew Facebook page and things like that. So it's a fantastic community. If you have not become a member, check it out. It does support everything that we do here. It's how we make a living. So it helps us. Every little dollar counts.
And there's GR crew members from around the country were there this weekend. So it wasn't just not just
East
locals.
Coast, Midwest, West Coast, Canada. It was all represented. It was pretty damn cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in live tonight. Please go follow Ladia. Show her some love on social media, whether it's Instagram or Twitter, or whatever. She's just a fantastic human, and she's up to some pretty amazing things this year already with the OTM. But she's got, I believe, Chuckanut, Tiger Claw, all sorts of great stuff coming up in the coming weeks. So she's going to be fun to follow. So do that if you have not already. That's it. Get out there, train hard, race harder, and party the hardest. I know I am. We've got a lot of great shows coming up, including our 300th episode. So you're not going to want to miss out. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to Kim's channel. She just dropped a review last week as well. We've got some good Orcas footage coming from your channel.
We both filmed at Orcas.
But I didn't do the polar plunge, but you did.
I did.
And you got it on camera. You're not going to want to miss it. Okay. We'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ginger.